Hi everyone, welcome to Discover Dorico for September. So today, I can see some people are already online. Hello, if you've got any questions as we go on, then please let me know. I'll try and keep an eye on the comments as always, as well as what we're going to do. Couple of housekeeping things. So screen quality, if the screen quality on that you're looking at isn't quite what you want it to be, in the bottom right hand corner of the video, you should find a little cog. On the YouTube side, there's a little cog there. If you click on that and set it to as high as possible, 720p ideally, then hopefully you should get a decent resolution. The first thing today really is this is the Steinberg homepage. If you visit the Steinberg homepage today, there's been some news released today. In fact, probably in the last hour, that the Dorico crossgrade has now been extended until further notice. So I just thought we'd better mention this. There's a news item on there which has all the details. The basic gist is that the crossgrade, if you already have Sibelius or if you already have Finale, the crossgrade to Dorico was going to expire at the end of September, but it's now going to carry on indefinitely. Well, it says until further notice. But note this bit in the middle, that if you have Notion is no longer a qualifying product. So as of the end of September. But the article's on there, so if you want to catch up on all of the details of which versions and everything else qualifies, then please read that one. Also recently, there's been some talk around High Sierra, which is the new Mac operating system. Actually, also, there's been a Windows 10 full creators update. The latest information from us really is be careful. We're not currently aware of issues on either of those operating systems, but we're going to continue qualifying Dorico on them both, and we'll then let you know. I suppose I would personally say at the moment, just be careful. I'm not personally going to update at the moment because I have no need to. Right now, I'd like to see obviously production machine. I'd like to see a bit of time pass and a few other people do it first. So if you want to do it, let me know, but be careful. There's also on the Mac side, there's a question about converting the file system and various other things. I'm not getting into detail, but just saying with the new operating systems available at the moment, it's just be careful. So today's session is going to be about answering questions. So over the past month, there have been a number of questions from people about how do you do something, or just getting confused about something, which is understandable. It's fine to ask those questions. They might be questions that I've been sent by email, or when I've met people, or when I've been talking to them, or sometimes they're questions that have appeared in things like the Facebook feed and things like that. I just thought it was worth, there's a few of those that are kind of a bit meaty and I thought was worth explaining and going through and showing. So the first one is, I know we kind of bang on about chord symbols a bit at the moment, but it is about chord symbols. And I suppose the confusion here is around some other people or some other programs and how they work. So with chord symbols in Dorico, let's delete this one. Here's a quick score we can add a chord symbol to. So now I've deliberately got two rhythm instruments here, but if on the piano part I was to add a chord symbol, so I'm pressing Shift Q, you can see my shortcuts on the bottom there, just enter the G7 again, press enter. Now, if you didn't have the guitar part, you might not have noticed. You'd probably, if it was just piano and these three horns, you would just get one chord symbol, as you probably would in many other programs. In Dorico, we add the chord symbol to any rhythm instruments. And the guitar part here, we're also getting the chord symbol appear. So the confusion that some people have had is kind of, how do I add things to other instruments? How do I get, how do I copy? In some people's cases, they'd say, how do I copy it to these other instruments or do something like that? The answer is, if you go into setup mode, for any of these other instruments, you can right click on them and there's a chord symbols option. Now, because chord symbols are, think of it like a kind of a system type object. It's their own track, if you like. You can choose where they display. They already exist, you just choose where they display. So you could say for the trumpet, you want to show for all instruments. It says all instruments because this is a player. So all of the instruments that the player is holding, maybe they're doubling trumpet and cornet, you're showing the chord symbols for all of the instruments for that player. So you see now I've got the A7, it's transposed automatically and it's displaying for the trumpet part. So here is where you would choose whether you want an instrument to include or not include chord symbols just by right clicking and choosing the options here. There's also options for whether you want them to show in the score only or the parts only or both. You may want some of those options too. So I just thought it was worth kind of showing graphically as a reference point. We can send people to just to say, this is how chord symbols work. It's not just an object on one staff. They're actually entered in multiple places. The next thing I wanted to look at was about staff sizes of things. So, and a few of these examples have been sent in by people this month, where I've said, oh, with what you're working on, can you send me a file? Because then I can explain it in your file. And then I've said to them, oh, it'd be really handy if I could show this. Is that okay? So thank you to anybody who sent me files and said, yes, you're allowed to use my file. A lot of these are unfinished. So if there's issues with the files, that's not any fault of the person who's doing it or anything else. It may just be unfinished. It might just be something they were playing with or an example we've made, but there were good examples to show here. So here's a piece of music that somebody's been writing, and in this particular case, it's for piano, oboe, and horn. Actually, if you have a look in setup mode, there's actually two pianos. There's a prepared piano as well. But what they wanted to know was in the piano part. So if I switch to the piano part up here, in the piano part, how do I create a piano part that also shows the horn and the oboe, so that the pianist, when they're playing, can see what's going on in the other parts and see what the soloists are doing. So to do that, here is the piano part. And if I go to setup mode here, I can choose the piano part on the right-hand side. Now, you could, if you wanted to, make a new layout. So if you wanted this piano part as it is, you could come down here and you could say, actually, I'll make a new instrumental part layout. But in this case, I'm just going to use the one we've already got. It doesn't matter. It's the same. You do it the same way. So with the layout that you want to work on chosen on the right-hand side, just tick the other instruments you want. So we've got piano ticked at the moment, which was the default. If I tick the horn and F here, and then if I tick the oboe part up here as well, then they will be added to this part. So I'll switch back to write mode, and you can now see that those two instruments are now also displayed on this part. So now if I select one of these staves, just click on it, and it does need to be a staff that has some notes in it, not just a bar rest. I can right click on it and choose staff size. And in here for staff size, you've got some options, so 60, 75, and 100. But there's also a custom staff size. So if you want a different size, just pick one of those. And if I just choose that one, so I'm going to say that one's going to be 75%. I'll do the same for this one here. It doesn't really matter which bit of the staff I've selected, as long as I've right-clicked on one of them. There we go. So now these two are now both smaller. So the piano now has these two instruments in its part displayed smaller above them. It may be that you also want to do things like here, for example, where they're not playing at all. You might want to hide those completely, hide systems. So in layout options, the vertical spacing, if I scroll down here and say that on the left-hand side, for the layout that I've selected, the one I'm working on, after the first system, let's hide empty staves. So I just click apply, click close, and then it's hidden them up here. So and because you can choose those hide empty staves options in that you want to, then you can get exactly what you need layout-wise from here. There was also a question about, in fact, let's do it in this file. If I keep scrolling in this file, before there's a page here which has a graphic on it. Now that was designed initially to be before this flow 2. So after flow 1, there was a page with a graphic on it for whatever reason. It could be all sorts of reasons. It could be other information about the next movement. It could be a graphic. It could make the page turns nicer. For whatever reason, there was a graphic there. But now we've added a couple of other instruments. We've messed up where that graphic displays because it was here on page 10. If we go to engrave mode, What I mean is that Flow 2 used to start on page 11, and now, of course, it doesn't because we've added more staves. So if we go to engrave mode, in the pages section here, if I scroll down, you can see this is my page with an override, because this graphic is an inserted page with an override. And it doesn't want to be there anymore. It actually wants to be here. So it wants to be on this page, effectively. So what we can do is, on the right-hand side here in the pages option, you see I've selected this page here. If I right-click on it, I can move pages. So I say move page, and I want to move it to before page 16, because once this page comes out, everything will shuffle up. So that's where I want to move it to. So I say move pages. So now if I scroll along, here we go. So now my graphic page has moved to before Flow 2. So this wasn't the particular example that we're looking for, but there was an example, in at least one example in the week, where somebody had a page that they'd put a particular frame on, or they'd done a particular override, or they'd added a graphic to, and it was now in the wrong place when they'd made some other changes to the layout. So that's how you can then move pages. So just going to quickly check if any comments about those things. There's a question about removing chords from instruments that are not playing. You would probably hide those. The guitar wouldn't have chords in that measure. No, the guitar wouldn't have chords in that measure because it wasn't playing anything, but I'm presuming that it was going to get some notes at some point in the example we did. But yes, if you've got, for example, you only want to display chords in a solo section, then you can highlight all of the chords, select either marquee select or deselect the chords in the solo section, and then you can hide in the properties panel any of the chords that you don't want to display. Talking of hiding and showing things, actually, here's one that I wouldn't use a huge amount, but if you really need to. So let's say I'll add a new, what should we do? Let's do a split, I think. What would the best way of showing this one? Yeah, let's go back to the beginning of this piece. So here is the first movement, the first flow, and I'm going to do I'll do a horizontal split, and down here we will show the full score. And let's say, so now I've got, this is my part and this is the full score. So let's say down here there was some text had been added, so you can see it appears in both. Occasionally, you might want something that appears in one side that doesn't appear in the other. So it appears in a part and doesn't appear in a score. Now, at the moment, this is a bit of a workaround, really. At the moment, there isn't a kind of official show in parts, show in score kind of option. And that's not always appropriate anyway, but here's one option that somebody was using. When you select the text, you can change the color. And what some people were doing was selecting the color option and turning it to white. And if you do that and change it to white, you can see it's disappeared on this full score that I'm working on, but hasn't disappeared on the part. So the one you change the color on, either the score or the part, it won't affect the other ones. That's only a change to that one layout, which in some cases might be useful. But also what I found was they'd done the same with notes. And actually there's a slightly better option with notes, because if you make things white, well, in fact, I'll do it. If I make this note white here, so if I turn on the color in the properties panel and make that white, then that note, it will disappear, but it also obliterates the staff lines. So now if I select that one again, instead of making it white, change the opacity here to 0%. There's a similar option on Windows as well. And then if I do that so it's opaque, then that's often a better option, because it's not obliterating the stuff and what you need. And again, it will only be affecting that one note in that one part. It's not in that layout, sorry, it's not affecting anything else. So occasionally, I'm not saying I recommend it, but at the moment, that is a potential workaround you might want to use. And if you're going to use it, please don't make them white, make them opaque instead, or set the opacity to 0, sorry. So let me just have a quick check with any comments on those. It wasn't anything particular on there. There were a couple of questions about other things that I will come back to, because I'm going to be looking at a couple of those things anyway. In changing the fonts of things, yes, in engrave mode, up here, you've got options for font styles, paragraph styles, and character styles. So you can either globally, well, yes, you can globally change for that particular thing you're looking for, the font, the size, and anything else if you wanted to change those. So we've looked at a few of those. Now, here's another example. I was looking at a file for somebody where initially the question was about, well, it was an example that used voices for things. So I just wanted to kind of clear something up. So in this little example here, I'm going to put some notes in. What should we do? Let's just we'll keep it simple. And then at the beginning over here, we'll press Shift V. You see the little caret here changes. So I've got plus downstem. So now I'm adding a new downstem voice to this file. So now if I do similar, you now see I've got both voices here on the staff. Now when I carry on, if I was to press, you've got my ghost note there. If I was to press Shift V again, which is what I did at the beginning, now it says +2. It's adding another downstem voice. So if I was to enter some more notes, you see I get a lot more rests and things appearing here. In fact, I'll make it simpler. Because I've added another downstem voice, which isn't what I wanted to do. If I'm just going to undo that, what I should have done at this point is just use V, not Shift V, just V, to toggle between the existing voices. There's been a bit of confusion as to, because you use Shift V the first time to create a voice, next time you want it, you press Shift V again. The problem there is you'll just keep creating more and more voices. So what can happen, and here's a case, is you have a piece of music here which looks fine. You know, it looks like, yes, there's a couple of voices here, no problem at all. And then occasionally you get things like this bar over here, bar 32, where you find that you've got some extra rests that are appearing and you're not quite sure why they're appearing, and they're becoming difficult to get rid of potentially, or, you know, why did they appear in the first place? If you go up to the view menu and go to note and rest colors and then go to voice colors, then you can see here all of the different colors, which means every different color here is a different voice. So if I go back to my example, this is probably what you would have started with: voice 1, voice 2, and maybe a different staff. So we've got two voices here. Sorry, the same voice on different staves here, so you can see them from the colors. And then you can start to see some of the other colors creep in. We've got some green and got some purple, and, you know, maybe that's okay. And then we've got some light blue and some pink and some, you know, there's all sorts of other voices creeping in, which you probably didn't need. Now, Dorico is, you know, there's only two voices there, so Dorico's making it work most of the time. But occasionally, as you start to create another voice as well, you'll get into these kind of problems. So to try and mitigate these problems ever happening, and then just remember, once you've created the voice once in that project, you probably you need to use just the shortcut V just to switch between the available voices, and you'll see the on the caret what we mean. And if you get a little plus, then you're adding another voice, which in some cases maybe guitar music is what you want, but in a lot of cases actually isn't. You just want to toggle with the existing voices. So the next thing I wanted to look at was another file sent in by one of you guys. And actually, I've opened this file and I've separated it out into multiple little windows so that we can see multiple parts. So here in the top left, we have a trumpet 1 part, and we've got a trumpet 2 part over here. And in the bottom left, we've got alto saxophone. And then on the right-hand side, we have trombone. And you can see 3 of these parts, especially, and possibly also the trombone part, they could probably all do with being on one page. So here, there's just one system up here, which actually, if space allowed, should really probably fit on this first page. It would certainly make it easier when you email it out or print it out for somebody. So the question is, so what do we do about it? How do we get from how do we get this system to be on this first page? So there's a few different options here, and because every case is going to be slightly different, I'll cover 2 or 3, and then we can, you can choose whatever's appropriate in your case. So let's say with this trumpet file here, oops, I don't need the properties panel open. What we'll do is we'll look at layout options, and maybe one of the things you could do would be to change the in page setup and layout options. You could just reduce the staff size. So if we reduced it from 7mm to 6mm, then that one would change, and that could be an option. Just undo that for a second. The reason being, you could make that change to multiple parts. So if I select the two trumpets, alto and trombone, now when I make the change here, then all of the parts change automatically. So maybe in this case, maybe that's potentially a good option. They're now all fitting on one page. So that might be one option that some people might want to use. There are other options. So let's put that back to 7. We could also go into the vertical spacing options. And I noticed in this particular file, there is probably more space between these than is possibly necessary. You might get away with having a bit less space. Now, you don't want to start dragging these around because you'll only be doing that in one layout and you probably won't manage to do it consistently. So to get it consistent between lots of the parts or lots of the layouts to get them all the same, if you come in here in layout options to vertical spacing, again, I've got all 4 here selected because these are the ones I want to change. If I change the inter-system gap here, so let's try 8 spaces. There we go. So these 3 here, if I just move that out of the way, you can see 3 of them have now changed. And just by reducing the space between them, instead of dragging them around and trying to work them out, it was much easier just to use the layout options and to edit those. However, this trombone part down here, maybe it either needs a bit less space or maybe it needs a different option. So in here, maybe what we should do is do something else. So a third option would be you could select, for example, I'm actually in engrave mode at the moment. You can't tell because I've got some of these things turned off. So I'm in engrave mode at the moment. If I select an item at the beginning, and then I'm going to command select the final bar line at the end here. And then, again, you can't see it because I turned all the panels off. Here we go. There's an option here for format music frames. So I know in some music programs you kind of make into page and you'd select a range of notes, or make into system is another option. We have make into system, but because we're working in frames, music frames, instead of on a page, then we have this, which is a format music frames option, and this button here, which is make into frame. So if I click that button, then it will make everything fit here, as you can see, so that now the trombone part also works. So that's kind of effectively an override to what we were using earlier. So the inter-system gap I used to start off with is going to make all the layouts the same, which is very useful. But sometimes you might want to use make into frame as well. And somebody's bound to ask. So yes, yeah. Let's also do. And while I've noticed it, down here on the trombone part, it ends halfway across now, halfway across the page. So if you go into note spacing, so I'm still in layout options. I still had this dialog open. It was just on a different screen. In layout options, I only really need to do it for the trombone part, but I could do it for all of them just in case. You can say here, only justify final system in the flow when more than 50% full. And that's just less than 50%. So if we say, all right, make it 40%, or maybe turn the option off if you don't want that. So I can now apply that option. So now it's meeting all the way across the page here. And maybe I want to even these two up. So again, I said we do system breaks and things like that. So Shift S, and when I've selected that bar line, puts a system break in, so I can neaten that up. So you've got some global options there if you want to change multiple parts all at the same time, and some options if you want to just do one part. And I still haven't had to drag anything around. The staff spacing option in Dorico won't drag things between frames, because that generally is actually more annoying, that you're upsetting the layout of other frames and other pages that you might have finished. So the staff spacing only affects the frame, or in most cases, the page that you're working on. So the next example I want to look at, oh, sorry, just check if there's any questions quickly. The LV ties, so the ties that So yes, the ties that kind of hang on. There isn't yet an option for those. The workaround, I suppose, in a lot of cases, you can use a slur because you can edit that in engrave mode to be where you want it to be. It's not the nicest option, but what you can also do is in play mode, you can increase the played length of the note. So playback wise, you can easily make that work. I think we'll carry on for a second. So the next example, actually, I'm going to start from the very beginning with this one. So if you want to follow along with this one, if we go into the hub, so I'll open hub, and in this particular case, we'll go to orchestral, and we'll just start with an orchestral template. What I'm going to do in this particular case is there was something came up on Facebook about doing these little examples at the beginning of the piece. So in this case, the timpani, it says timpani in, and it's got the two notes that the timpani will play, so you know what to tune the timpani to. And we were looking into kind of options of how you might make this work. So at the moment, I'd say probably we would use a music frame. So we'd add a little music frame in here to next to the one with all the rest of the music in. So we're going to kind of work on that particular example. So I'll move that out of the way for a second. So here we have an orchestral score, which has a timpani in it. So that's a good start. And since somebody just asked, is there an update already considering writing drum percussion parts? That's what we're currently working on. I don't have any news at the moment for you, apart from the update will be in the autumn. Yes, it is autumn, but I don't have an update for you today. So for timpani, this is a pitch percussion anyway. What I'm going to do in this case is we need to add a little example in here, which will tell you the timpani tuning. So what we're going to do is, just to recap, is to work on this little example here and add this little example in. So to start off with, I suppose, because somebody also asked, the trumpets here in our standard template were in B flat, whereas the trumpets in the example were in E. So in setup mode, if you come over here to trumpets, you expand this little option here. So you're expanding the player to look at the instrument that the player is playing. Here is the instrument, and I can just change the instrument. I don't have to create a new one and copy and paste it or anything else. I just change the instrument. And if I put trumpet, then the options I have include E, and it was an E no key signature, so we'll have that one change. So my trumpet is now a trumpet in E. And if somebody did want to know, they wanted to know if they could put so that it said two trumpet in E. So, I put in, didn't I? I didn't need to put in because that's added automatically. My mistake. Okay. So 2 of them in E. So the next thing, now, one thing I did look at was just adding a kind of a copy of the timpani before it. So using the same player. In this particular example, if I just bring this back on screen again, in this particular example, there's a pause in the first bar. Now, because there's a pause, and the pause would get added to all of the instruments at the same time, it would also get added here. And there's no pause marked here. And I didn't want to have to kind of get into how to get rid of that pause. So I'm going to create a new timpani instrument so that it's completely separate and isn't going to end up with that pause marking in there as well. So in here, in setup mode, I'm going to add a new player. I just said instrument, didn't I? I'll add a new timpani player. The no key version is fine. So now at the bottom down here, it's added timpani 2. I'm just going to drag that one up. Oops, too far. I'm going to drag it up to here. So now I have 2 timpani, which also isn't what I need, but bear with me. So again, if you want to change the name of this one in the original, it just said timpani in. So I'll say timpani in, and timpani, which is handy because it's removed that one for me as well. Now what I'm going to do is create a new flow. So down here in the bottom right, the bottom of the screen, new flow. And in the first one, we'll say this one can be timpani in, because I'll remember what that one is. And this one will be my first movement. Flow 2 will be the first movement. So in flow 1, I don't want all of the other instruments. So I'm going to just untick them. And they're slowly disappearing. I do want timpani in. I don't want that one. I don't want that one, or that one, or any of these. So what happens now is this one just says timpani in. That's the only thing in that flow. And this one here is where my piece starts. Okay. Now in this one here, we wanted the 2 notes that we were going to add. So if I start over here in write mode, I'll select 7 and I'll enter those 2 notes. Oh, in the wrong octave. Okay. Where my keyboard is, which octave my keyboard's in, there we go. So I'll move them down to the right octave. So now I've got the 2 little notes that I wanted. One other option that you might want to do is remove this end final bar line, because I don't want that to display. So what I'm going to do is go to notation options. And because notation options are per flow, and this is an individual flow, the timpani in one, I'm just going to say no bar line. So my movement, well, which is flow 2, will still have a final bar line, but this little example won't. There you go. So it's gone. Now you also might say, but I don't want there to be this page at the beginning with this little example in it. I want it to be down here. So how do we do that? So to start off with, if we go to engrave mode, and I'm going to edit my master pages here. So I'm going to double click here, and in flows, I'm going to say that I don't want to include timpani in. I only want to include flow 2. So normally it's doing all. If you've got multiple movements in this piece, you'd need to tick all of the movements in here. There is, of course, another option. Depending on your case, you might want to choose the players and filter the players instead. But in my case, filtering the flow is going to be much quicker. It's just one tick. So that one now says flow 2. It's done this side automatically. So I'll close the master page editor. So now I have my movement. There's nothing else before it. And I need to put the timpani example in here because it now doesn't appear anywhere. So what we've done is in the master pages, we've said that we don't want flow 1 to appear by default. So it's no longer part of that template. So down here, what we'll do is we'll choose the frames option, add a new music frame. And just for a second, I'll stick it over here just so you can see it clearly. And you go, oh, what a mess, because it's added all the instruments in. So actually, all I want in here is timpani in. I only want one flow. So I'm going to filter the flow. So here's my little example. So what it was doing was showing me all of the staves all squished into one box. I didn't want that. So here we now have my little musical example. Now, I should stress that I would normally do this at the end of the piece, because as you add items into all of these staves, as you add notes and text and dynamics and anything else, they're going to space themselves out. So moving this flow around to where I want it to be, this music frame, I'm going to move it now to where I want it to be, but actually in the end, I don't really want it to be there necessarily exactly here, if you see what I mean. So once I've added some notes, if it's respaced these staves, I'd have to reposition this, but I'll show you what it is now. I've also noticed what I've forgotten to do is I've got 2 timpani in here and I still don't want them. So in setup mode, flow 2, I don't want timpani in to display. So what we should have is this. So we've got just one timpani and it says timpani in. We also don't need this text because it's not in the original. If we just go back to the original, we're getting closer. So it says timpani in, and it doesn't then say timpani underneath there, of course. So what we'll do is in setup mode, this one here, we will edit the names, and this singular full name here, I'll just delete it. I don't need it to display. Gone. Now, annoyingly, it also deletes it from here, so that I can see what's going on. I'm going to put it back in here, but not here, so that it doesn't display on the score, but I can still tell what's going on, because otherwise it wouldn't display anything here. So now in engrave mode, we put this frame and we can move it to the beginning. Now, here's a few things that are kind of optional depending on exactly where you want to do it. So we'll cover a few. To make some space, if I select the outer music frame, so this is this one with all of the music in it, and you probably know that you can select the individual bits of frames. So when I've got the whole frame selected, if I press tab, you see it's now selected up here, just at the top corner of the screen. And I can now press down and it will select this one here, and I can press Alt and move it slightly, and I can press Command and Alt, make more space at the beginning to fit this little frame in here to where I need it to be. I also have a few other options. This little frame here, if I was to choose its outer option and move it in a bit, then I can adjust the size of that one too. I can also move the whole frame up and down, so I can position it to where I want it to be. And also, as somebody mentioned on Facebook when we were looking at this option, what you could do is also adjust the note spacing in here if you wanted these to be a bit tighter. So if I toggle the note spacing option in here, then I can change this note here, and I could move the notes in to be tighter if I wanted them to be, as the little graphical example. There's also an option here where you can adjust the indent of just one particular staff. So you can move that, you can move notes in. You've got multiple options here as to exactly what you want to move and how you want to move them. But the end result is to get this to appear here. I've also seen an example today where actually there was a bit of a gap between the two, so that's fine. You just space them accordingly. So you can now see you can move everything around. If I just go back to write mode for a second, I've now got the two notes at the beginning. We zoom in and show you the example. This is effectively a new, its own little flow in a frame, which is happened to be positioned at the right place for the timpani. So the timpani can now carry on as its normal instrument, and we could put the key signature and the time signature and everything else in here. It would display correctly for all of the other subsequent pages. It would still have the name for the layout, so that's still going to work. But this little example at the beginning means that it's also labeled correctly just on the score for how that should work. So there are other things in addition to this. For example, doing these two horns here in E on effectively a grand staff is probably problematic at the moment. Actually, the fagotti, the bassoons here, is easier because they don't transpose. You could sort of do it with a piano, change the name because there's no transposition involved. With the horns here, I don't even go into it at the moment, to be honest. Leave it with us, and we will come up with options for that, but not quite yet. But hopefully that shows you anyway for kind of another option for kind of layout options, what you can do with flows, little examples that you can insert into things, and to kind of get you into the way that that Dorico will often work, and things you can do with it, and little excerpts like that. So so that's the last example I wanted to show for today. Let me just quickly check a couple of the questions that have come up on the comments. Okay, you've written quite a few. Yes, the next update we will do will have the non-pitch percussion, so 5-line drum staff. I'm quite excited about that one. I might have seen something, but nothing to show you yet, unfortunately. Somebody's asking about sound sets. Robert is asking about sound sets for Vienna Symphonic Library, sort of like Sibelius has. So the sounds that you get with Dorico by default are the Halion library. If you want to use other sample libraries, there are options, and you can use those. I mean, in my version here in play mode, I've also got the ARIA player, which is GPO 5, and Contact, which can load various other things, and there's a Spitfire library. Some of the things we're working on at the moment, that you'll probably actually need rather than sound sets, are expression maps. If you need a GPO 5 expression map, then please drop me an email, and I can send you a copy of which I believe should work, because I've tried a few of those things out. There are a couple of things we're working on still with expression maps, but generally they should be okay. You're asking particularly about Vienna Symphonic Library. I don't yet have an expression map, although there's a lot of Vienna Symphonic Library libraries. So I'd be interested to know which ones you're using, so that we can look at the right ones. I happen to be looking at a Spitfire one at the moment, if that's of interest to people as well. And there's just checking the other questions. Changing the default instrument name, does it affect the instrument name on the part? So when you go to a part, here's the flute part, it's very exciting at the moment. If you go into engrave mode and double click on the flute, you'll notice it's actually using the layout name here. It's not using the players here, it's using the layout name, and the layouts are on the right hand side. So this layout name here is what actually displays on the parts. So you can, if you need to, kind of change one and not the other, or if you do need to change one, beware of which one you need to change. It's probably the layout name you want to change. However, of course, you can just double click on this and type in the correct instrument. If you want to say flute on a Tuesday or something, that would be fine. You should edit the text as appropriate. Now I'm just checking a couple of the other questions. Bear with me a second. There's a question from Robert about bringing a piano composition in Cubase into Dorico. So bringing things into Dorico, you would be best off using a music XML file. In programs like Cubase, you'll need to go into their score editor first, not because you need to do anything in there, but if you can see the score editor, then you'll find in the file menu there's an export as music XML option. Export that music XML file, import that into Dorico, and you should be good. Andre asks if fingering will be included in the next update. Yes, that's the plan. Trills and ornaments playback, I don't know of at the moment. I could check, but I don't believe so at the moment. Trills are slightly tricky, actually, especially with different sample libraries, because different sample libraries have different options or key switches or the like that they need to use to know, are they trilling a whole tone or a semitone? So we are aware of those. And the documentation of the Lua. Oh, yes, the scripting. I will have to check on that one. If you want to drop me an email to ask me any of these questions as well, if there's anything I haven't answered that you say, but hang on, I really need to know, then at any time you can get in touch with us at discoverdorico@steinberg.de. There's just kind of to recap and on a few other things. You can also sometimes find us in person at things. So events that are coming up over the next month or so, not an exclusive list, but ones that include, in fact, even next week in Manchester in the UK, there's an education expo. So if you're a teacher and going to the education expo in Manchester, which is on October the 4th next week, then you can find me there, actually, if you want to ask me any questions. Also on the same day at the Seattle Film Institute, you can see Dorico being demonstrated there and ask questions. On the 8th of October, there's a session in Milan. On the 12th of October, there's a session at Yamaha Music London. And also in early November will be at Interlude, which is the Ontario Music Educators Association. It's their conference in Canada, which is early November. If you want any more details of any of these events, they're actually generally listed on Facebook. If you have a look on the Steinberg page on Facebook at the moment, I know that they're definitely all on there. So facebook.com/ well, you'll find Steinberg on there. But also, actually, there are a couple of other things I need to mention. So the next Discover Dorico session will be on Wednesday, the 18th of October, which is a change in both cases in that it's a Wednesday, not a Thursday, and it's not the last Thursday of the month. For a couple of reasons, some personal, some things like holidays, like Christmas, looking towards the end of the year. This session can't always be either on a Thursday or the last Thursday of the month. So the plan is that I'm going to have to move it to Wednesdays, so it'll be middle of the week. It'll be the same time, so 4 o'clock UK and the same time we started in your time zone. But it'll be on a Wednesday, and it may be a week earlier than you expect, if you like. So maybe kind of the second to last Wednesday. It will always be mentioned, of course, on Facebook, and we'll publicize exactly when that date will be. The next session will be Wednesday, the 18th of October at the same time. Social media wise, when we're mentioning all these things, there's also some new social media channels you can look at. Now, there are some groups, of course, that exist already, but if you now look for DoricoOfficial, we've set up an official Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram account for Dorico, where you can find all the latest developments and things that are happening. So product information, engaging stories about things, promotions about things, all of those things that we kind of information we send out, and now they have actual pages for those on, for example, on Facebook. So facebook.com/DoricoOfficial, twitter.com/DoricoOfficial, also Instagram for pictures of events and things we're at. It's again /DoricoOfficial. All the discussion and debate about things and questions, fine to leave those on the current groups, so the current Facebook groups and that kind of thing. I'll still be checking into those and answering questions on there. But there will be some new pages. If you come and like our pages, then you'll get all of the latest information and know that you're up to date with all of those things from our pages. And as always, if you've got any questions and anything I haven't answered in the comments that you have a question about, please email me on discoverdorico@steinberg.de. Discover Dorico, all one word. So discoverdorico@steinberg.de. Email me anytime during the month. And if you've got some things like we've done today, where you've kind of got examples of things that you think would be a really good thing to show, and that other people might want to know, or just if you've got a question about there's something you mentioned that I didn't quite get, or just questions about Dorico, then please just get in touch with me by email as well. So Facebook, email, your favorite social media. Yeah, use those, get in touch with us, ask us questions. And if there are questions that come up that are useful, then I'll ask you in advance, but maybe I'll be able to use those files or projects or questions and use those in the next session as well. So if you have any questions and things that you want to ask that will be useful in these sessions, again, just email and let me know. So I'm just quickly going to check a couple of the questions that are coming up here on the comments. So I think some of them been answered. Real-time recording. Yes, I'm surprised how many people don't actually use real-time recording. A lot more people seem to prefer putting the notes in and knowing that they're correct, rather than editing them later when you've when I make a mistake when I'm doing real-time metronome recording. But we will at some point, certainly. And Paul's been answering some of the questions on here anyway. Repeats playback. Yes, that's definitely on the list in the playback things. I don't think we yet have a time schedule for that. We'll answer some of these anyway if they've popped up on Facebook and things anyway. And let's see, DoricoOfficial. Yes, DoricoOfficial, one word. So if the Facebook channels, for example, facebook.com/DoricoOfficial. But if you do a search on any of these social media platforms, then I'm sure you'll find it. If you can't, of course, get in touch with me and let me know. I have mentioned it on the group anyway, so there is a link on that group if you want to link through from there. Humanized playback. There is a humanized playback option already, but not if you're meaning kind of the Expressivo swing option, which was a little bit odd in some ways. And I think that's it for most of those questions. I will answer some of the questions that are in the comments when we finish this session now. I don't have anything else to show, so we can look at some of those. But as I said, get in touch with me if you've got any questions or anything we don't answer in there. Discover Dorico, all one word, at steinberg.de. So thank you for watching. And please join me on the next one, which will be Wednesday, the 18th of October at the same time. Thank you.